reach and really helps people move from the streets into housing, really using some very basic but impactful strategies. He founded that organization in 1992 and quietly but very successfully ran that organization for many years. Then in 2007 founded an organization called Home First Development. And what he's doing with Home First Development, I think, is really intriguing and very timely. And he's got a model for building and developing affordable housing that I think is a great complement to the CDC industry, to the affordable housing world and the tools that we've been using in this state for many years. And he brings a slightly different approach that I'm pretty excited about, and I'm eager for you to hear from him. So with that, let me invite Rob to join me in appropriate attire and speak to you a little bit about what he's up to. Rob?
Thank you. So if you can't read this shirt, I'll put it out here. So the shirt says, and you have to think about it a little bit, the affordable housing industry must profit less to end homelessness. So you can think about it. So when Janet asked me to come talk, it was related to another talk I had given, and there was a quote that she kind of grabbed onto, and it was related to affordable housing. And my comment was, I feel like we're building affordable housing on the backs of the poor, or poor people. Well, here I am, but I want to back up a little bit. I want to tell you a little bit about myself. I grew up in a small town in northern Arizona, a big town called Snowflake, Arizona. At the time, I think does snow there, but at the time, about 3,000 people. I come from a family that we built our own house. My grandfather built his own house. He worked in construction and was telling the story about he got permission to take a little bit of lumber one day after a job, and after about 7 years he had enough materials to build his own place. So that's a little bit of the mindset that I bring to the work. I'm a doer. Really don't like meetings that much. But part of it for me is I have two passions. One is my family, and the other is ending suffering of low-income people. I'm obsessed with that idea. I've witnessed firsthand, like all of you, the pain that people go through, and and I'm haunted by tears of individuals and families. And when I look at what we're doing as an industry, and very specifically within the affordable housing industry, it is unacceptable. So I started this nonprofit called Join. I was working finished my graduate studies. I came back to Portland and got a job at a soup kitchen. Actually, if you know Portland, St. Francis Dining Hall. Started to build relationships. My background in a lot of my studies centered around the work of Paulo Freire. I don't know if people are familiar with Pedagogy of the Oppressed. So I came to the work with a very different mindset, with an idea that is more rooted in community organizing, in activism, than it is clinical. But based on the stories, I felt like, we need to do things differently. And I was hanging out with, at the time, we called them homeless campers. Now we reference them as chronic. But I would listen to their stories about, the programs, and they needed to go into a shelter, into treatment, and then, eventually they would get into housing. So I started to do community organizing with folks. And out of that organizing, they created the vision of this nonprofit called Join, where we would work directly with folks on the streets, and we didn't call it Housing First, but that is what evolved out of our organizing. So we started working with homeless individuals to move directly from the streets into housing, and then spent a lot of time connecting them to resources, helping them stabilize, figure it out. Because that transition from the streets inside, I would often talk about we're reinculturating people. What does it mean to have a neighbor? You've been outside, your body has changed. So, you're hot. So let's open all the windows. Oh, got the heat cranked. Helping people transition. So the key was transition. Transition where? Into housing. So early on, I found myself battling the affordable housing folks because they were building units, but they didn't want to take our folks. They've been outside for a long time. We have a really nice place here. So right from the get-go, my love or disdain for the industry was directly related to that battle. And I will say, as years went by, we won some of that. They did open the doors. But in that process, we started, the available housing, wasn't there. And so we started to build relationships with private landlords. And we had amazing success. So by the time I left Join, we were moving one person a day off the streets into permanent housing. About 85% of those folks were moving into the private market. And part of that was that we worked out a deal with landlords to say, we're going to be there. Here's the outreach worker. You have any issues, you're going to have a team of folks that's wrapped around this individual. And this was a key, idea for us was, no, there were not services that were attached to that building. But we were attaching services to the individual. So really important distinction. Because in the end of the day, it is not about a building, it's about the people. One of my board members, a gentleman named Dave Carbonneau. Dave is from the private sector, had worked for Portland General Electric, had been involved in developing of power plants, a very sophisticated individual who understood numbers inside and out. And so I was sharing with him this issue around, we need to do something different around housing availability. And I'm looking at what's happening in the affordable housing world, and one, they're producing maybe 50 units a year, and the cost per unit is close to $250,000 per unit, and it was taking 4 years, 5 years to get built? No. My friend Dave says, you know what? This affordable housing, this is a math question. So I remember sitting at Zell's Cafe with Dave the day after he retired, and he pulled out a napkin. He said, let's say we went a $600 rent. And for some people that's too high. But, and let's work backwards. So what would the land need to cost? What would we need to come in on the construction? The financing. Let's kind of do the math. And so that conversation led to other conversations. We started connecting with general contractors, other developers, architects. And in the end, we came out with a formula we felt like could work. And my friend Dave just retired. He said, you know what? I have a little bit of money in the bank. Let's test the model. So he put up his own capital to buy a piece of land at the absolute worst time you could do it, 2008. We didn't build right away because no banks would lend to us. I remember his wife wasn't really thrilled with the idea. I thought we were retired. But in the end, we built 47 apartments. Those apartments' rents were below 50% of MFI. No government subsidy. We used the model, his capital. And we built them per unit was right around $68,000 a door, all in, land and everything. Naively, I'm like, wow, I think we're on to something. It's our first project, and we just finished our 5th project, but and every time we've gotten better. But naively, I said, I'm going to go talk to City of Portland and the commissioner who oversees the Portland Housing Bureau. So, probably shouldn't mention his name, but he came out. His one of his staffers came out. It was a beautiful day. Sun was shining. We had 13 different agencies. We filled up immediately. We had 13 different agencies that had folks in our units. We had built several units that were full ADA. We're talking to the new tenants, beautiful courtyard. It's kind of a garden-style apartment, similar to the one you see on the screen. Here's our pro forma. This is what it cost. And they said, really? That low? That was with the land? Yes, it was with the land. The staff person looks at him and said, we could never sell this to the CDCs. I'm like, are you effing kidding me? No government subsidy. We just built 47 units, below market rents, and we can't sell it to the CDCs. And it was my first hint of how powerful the affordable housing industry is. So as we started looking at doing more housing, one of the things that happened was our banker, a gentleman named Mark Stevenson, works locally at Pacific Continental Bank now, absolutely loved the model. And when your banker loves your model, and he's thinking the economics of this works, and not only for what you're trying to do, but, he goes, I could see private investors that could get excited about this, and if they're okay and comfortable with a 2 to 3% return. So he became our number one advocate. Introduced us to another nonprofit who had some land, had some capital. They said, can you replicate it? I think we can. And we did. So as we started to build a relationship with this nonprofit, that nonprofit is called PHC Northwest, Portland Habilitation Center. PHC already had some of its own property, already owned over 500 and some units. They had their own maintenance crew, landscaping, property management folks that we started to build relationship with. And one of the best things we did was we sat down with their property management and the individuals that did the maintenance on their units. And we said, all right, so this is what we built the first time. Here's our specifications. However, for us, we want, one, to make sure we're keeping your operational costs low, so it's not just to build affordably, but to operate affordably. And, let's talk durability. Let's talk about long-term, because it's one thing to build something affordable. It's another thing that, we want it to be there 60, 70, 80 years from now. I keep telling this story because it was for me, the most profound question in interaction I had, because these individuals said, you know what? One individual, I've been doing maintenance, for 25 years. No one's ever asked. By the way, our architect was in the room. They're like, all right, we live in Portland. No flat roof, please. Pitched is good. Please don't put anything mechanical on the roof. Talking about humidity sensor fans in the bathrooms, Corian hard surface on the window. They started kind of listing out, what was critical. And eventually, we tweaked that specifications. Guess what? It did not create a real uptick in our cost. So we just, are completing our, our fourth project with PHC, replicating that model. As of today, we have not tapped into any government resources. Our rents are between 30 and 50% of MFI. And actually, if you could switch the prompter just to that next. And I'm not going to go through this, but you can kind of look up there. So we're just now starting to have conversations with the state and working with some of the state partners who said, you know what, with your model and maybe this 4% tax credit, we think this can work. So we're having those conversations. So right now, today, in 2016, we'll break ground on 243 units. In 2017, we're going to break ground on 258 units. So, over 500 units. Feel pretty good about that. And one of the things I feel real good about is, we're building several units in East County. And one of the things we've been doing is building relationships with the school districts. Because we had folks who live in downtown. Oh my gosh, you're going to, import more poor people to the east side of Portland. Guess what? There are poor people on the east side of Portland. And have entered into what I would say pretty exciting conversations with the school districts. Just last week, we met with the Reynolds School District. And we said, all right, we have coming online that we're breaking ground this summer, but coming online the spring of 2017, 154 units. Reynolds, let's talk about who's going to live there. And they, they're like, well, we have these families. We have families that are homeless. They started, how can we, connect Multnomah County and get some rent assistance? And they said, this is kind of the first time for us that we've had a developer of any type meet with us early and start to talk about, how do we connect those families that are low income or homeless within our school district to housing. And housing where the rents, are not only below 50% of MFI, but some of our one-bedroom minis, go all the way down to $395 a month. Again, no subsidy. Feeling pretty good about that. But this is what I'm not feeling pretty good about. And frankly, it pisses me off. The affordable housing industry, and thus the shirt, they've come after us pretty hard. They're like, who the hell do you think you are? Right off the bat, oh, you must be building shit housing. Well, you know what? Come on out. Kick the tires. Here's our specs book. Let me introduce you to Frank, who does maintenance, who helped design, and really develop, how we're building these units. And my frustration in Portland is that not only is that affordable housing industry been fairly aggressive in trying to us not have a voice, but they worked real hard with the electeds. Don't listen to these guys. Don't mess with the industry. Advocates, advocates are real good friends with, people within the industry. So that, and I've literally had folks from the local Welcome Home Coalition say, Rob, don't rock the boat. I mean, we want, to have this bond. We want to get a lot more money. Absolutely. I mean, we absolutely need more money for affordable housing. But, you know what? The cost to develop, we need to cut it in half. Literally cut it in half. $200,000 a door, $250,000 a door is unacceptable. And the bottom line is, guess what? You bring down that cost, we can build more housing. We can take that investment and increase, because for me, that's what I care about. We have an inventory issue, and we need to streamline and figure out how we can build affordable housing quicker, less expensive, without, compromising on the quality. So this is where I really got to piss people off. And if people start to frown, I'm okay with that. Reggie, But here's some different items that I feel like keep housing more expensive. And right off the bat, the conversation about prevailing wage. Big issue. So one of the ways we keep our costs down is we tap into small business, not big firms. I would say most of our plumbers, electricians are unionized, but our framers, our roofers are not. But we did a wage inventory with the folks that have been working on our jobs. And what was interesting to me was our framers, on average, are making $27 an hour. If we had to adhere to more of a commercial prevailing wage, we'd have to double that dollar amount. And a lot of the subs that we're using, we couldn't use. So, you know what, I'm okay. We have an inventory issue. And I feel real good about the wages that our folks, and I feel real good about working with small businesses. Our roofer, or one of our roofers, it's a Latino family, a father and his 2 sons. Great work. They work their ass off. I feel pretty good about it, and they love working with us. I feel real good about that relationship. And it gives these small businesses an opportunity. One of the other issues that increase the cost of affordable housing, workforce training. In concept, it sounds great. But as a requirement for our subs means, again, our smaller subcontractors can't do it. They're not big enough. So it forces you to have to work with a bigger guy. And again, we are in a crisis. So from an intellectual, workforce training sounds good, but it increases our costs. This dabbling with LEED certification and requiring different green elements increases the costs. It also increases the operational costs. In Portland, if you talk to anybody that's been involved with the Bud Clark Commons, which was the $47 million building downtown, great service, have no issues at all of the service it's providing and the people that it's housing. But ask anybody about their gray water system. What does that cost them on a monthly basis, and has it ever really worked right? And over $200,000 that they had to spend on just consultants to get that LEED certification. Increase the cost. And here's the one that I really piss people off, is developer fee. So the standard, about 10%, of a project, goes to that developer fee. A lot of the folks that are developing this housing get paid on a percentage basis. So my argument is, because of that, there's an incentive to increase your costs. Well, here's the fact. A lot of good people working at CDCs and some nonprofits that are building housing. However, their business model is dependent on that developer fee. And, the smaller ones say, we need to do a project every 3 years that's cost about $12 million because we need that $1.2 million of a developer fee because that's how we pay ourselves. It's ass backwards. So we have, and again, well-intentioned, and that's how things were set up, some of them, 20 years ago. But that issue around the developer fee and this higher cost, there's a conflict. Part of our model is it's a flat fee. It's not based on a percentage. And, I actually have an ethical issue when an organization or an individual is making $1 million. City of Portland just came out with, or NOFA, one of the projects is a $55 million project. Well, are they going to take a $5.5 million developer fee? And is that fee going to go to services? I know somebody who quit their job over that issue. Here's another one that kind of hits a little closer to home. Support services. Permanent supportive housing. I am an advocate that services needed to be attached to people, not buildings. And there's some exceptions there. The exceptions, if our target is to work with the severely mentally ill, dual diagnosed folks, when we're really talking about, where people really need to be sustained and programmed, absolutely. And I put the category I put that population in is in the 0 to 15% of MFI, not 0 to 30. 0 to 30 encompasses folks that are working at Subway. No, so let's, and if it was up to me, the majority of subsidy would be going towards that 0 to 50% of MFI. Because I believe that we can build affordable housing for folks that are making 30 and above without big subsidies if we reduce the profit that is made in these projects. So the other issue with around support services is around the operating costs. We're looking at our operating cost of our projects, and we're looking at, we're about $2,500 a year, per unit of operating costs. So we're kind of looking at that, but we're looking at a lot of government-funded projects, and their operating costs are really high. $5,000 per unit, $6,000 per unit, per year. I'm like, what's up with that? Well, we have, we're paying staff to provide services with folks in the project. Okay, concept that sounds good, but wait a minute. You're paying your staff from the rents of poor people? Struggle a little bit with kind of, and again, one of my frustrations in this housing conversation is we get caught up into these, 0 to 30% conversations. But I want to talk about people who struggle with mental illness. And what, and are we targeting and creating places for those folks to be? Support services. I have a little bit of a list here. Mark, I'm going to apologize for this next one.
Because I'm not uncomfortable enough.
And I really appreciate her being up here with me.
Reggie and I will be fired at the same time.
Yeah. And this actually relates more to the city of Portland, but the city of Portland wanted to give us some money on one of our projects. All right, we'll entertain that conversation. So, we initially said yes, and then right off the bat, they said, well, we want to introduce you to our team. Our team. Yeah, we have 6 people here, and we're your teammates, and we're going to help you develop this project. We need you because, and right from the get-go, the architect we use, he's 55 years old, seasoned, worked with big firms, really good at what he does. And we had, nice guy, this 28-year-old architect saying, well, don't you think, and right from the get-go, they're wanting to redesign our project. Well, one of the reasons why we're able to build affordably is we streamline the process. We have a couple of different designs of a building, the same specs. We're not reinventing the wheel. So we spent 2 months with the team from the Portland Housing Bureau, and we finally just walked away because we just watched our cost go up. What do you mean you're not going to take the money? It's not worth it. And part of it is we want to illustrate that you can do business differently. You can build quality housing. And, part of, in interfacing with this industry, they've gotten very comfortable and they assume that things cost as much as they do. I would also argue that the affordable housing industry in Portland has systematically increased the cost to develop housing, period. And I'm going to give you a very concrete example of that. We are building housing in East County. Land costs were still pretty reasonable. And after doing this for a while, we had a couple of local nonprofits that had been developing housing downtown said, we think we're going to buy land in East County to build. Well, they're used to paying, $200,000, $25,000 a door for land. We're buying it for $7,000 a door. Within a month, the cost of land on East County went up because two nonprofits right out the bat, they said, $15,000 a door is a bargain for us. And we watched systematically the cost of land on the east side go up. Thank you very much, affordable housing folks. One of the other things that kind of pisses me off is, and Mary, you tell me if I need to just stop. Because I'm... No. I like this list of things that pisses Rob off. Yeah. And I do at the end, I want you to reflect upon it. I want you to go home to where you live, and I want you to look at the budgets of these affordable housing projects differently.
Yeah. Let's go 5 more minutes on the list of things that pisses Rob off, and then we'll go into some small group discussion.
All right. So here's something that happened in Oregon just recently. We just passed, a lot, so we can do inclusionary zoning in Oregon. The concept of inclusionary zoning, it's a good idea. The idea of asking developers who are building private market homes to include affordability, absolutely. Well, guess what? The real estate development folks are pretty sophisticated in their lobby and how that law gets played out. And as we speak, there is now a committee, being facilitated at Portland City Hall of a lot of developers who are making the argument that, sure, this inclusionary zoning is fine, but you're going to have to pay us, because it's really hard to have our private market projects pencil. Well, if you didn't, make, $4 million on a project, maybe it would pencil. But right now, the conversation with these private developers is, give us our money. Sure, we'll play, but you're going to have to subsidize. Well, where's that money come from? Are we going to rob Peter to pay Paul? The bottom line for me is we have to reduce the cost to build affordable housing so we can build more housing. And there's too many people, from lawyers to architects to contractors to developers to some nonprofits, that are making too much damn money on the backs of poor people. And it pisses me off. I'll stop there.
Looks like Rob has more paper, so if you want to catch him after the meeting, maybe in the bar, he can illuminate, go a little farther.
So one of the ways my partner and I keep our costs low is we meet at the Green Dragon Pub.
There you go. Is that where we're going?
That's my office.
All right, okay, all right, very good.
But Rob, you're not off the hook yet.
Yeah, you're not off the hook yet.
Margaret, did you want to share a few reflections before we go into small group discussion?
Yeah, just a couple of really quick ones. I know that Rob has given everybody a lot to think about. He gives me a lot to think about when I'm around him, and he certainly has today. But I think I want to underscore this idea that we are in a crisis. We are in a crisis. And I am challenging myself and the people that work for me and the people that I work with every day to think about we have to do some things differently. And we have to be open to other models and other people who bring forward solutions. And it's not always fun or easy to try and do that with public money. But I think it is absolutely our charge to figure out how we can make it easier, how we can get more units out of every dollar, every grant, every tax credit, every public taxpayer dollar we possibly can. That is our charge. And I take that very seriously and want to just sort of invite everybody in this room to really go there with us. So I think we're going to just let you do table conversations for a few minutes.
Yep.
And then are you going to bring Rob back for a little more, for your provocative questions? Because he's kind of shy and retiring. You might have to draw him out of his shell just a little bit. But talk amongst yourselves and we'll be back in a few minutes.
Rob, we're going to ask you to come back up because people want to talk to you about the list of things that piss Rob off. All right, Rob, you ready to come back up here? Yes, come here now. All right, I'm going to turn over to Margaret.
Yep.
Let's hear about
I've got
things.
one sort of provocative public policy issue that I want to sort of tease out for a little bit. So prevailing wages, and let me just be clear, I am agnostic on this question, okay? I am agnostic on this question, but I think there's a public policy question that I would like to sort of tease out a little bit. Prevailing wage. I think the idea that you would pay your framers and your plumbers and all the workers on the job site the wage that is in the market in the moment in which you're building is right on. What we've piled on in government is the idea that you have to prove that you've paid a good wage. And you have to submit payrolls, and you have to have somebody come out with a clipboard and double check. And then you have to look at their certifications and check their union card. And there is a lot of things we do that are really designed to make sure Rob isn't cheating and his general contractor isn't cheating, that you're really, really paying the prevailing wage. And the same is true when it comes to your rents. Well, if I'm the government funder, how do I know he's really renting to poor people? How do I know his rents are really where they're supposed to be? And what's my obligation as the public agency to go look in the files in his leasing office and to check that they've got the tax return of the tenant and they're really low income? And so this is a thing that we, I think, struggle with. And he hasn't taken any of our money yet. I hope he does, and I hope we find a good way to have that marriage. But I do think there's this place where we've regulated to the lowest common denominator because we're afraid folks are going to cheat us, and the taxpayer in me thinks that's a good thing, right? But it runs in the face of how do you just keep it simple and just get the work done, just get the people into the apartments. So I don't know if you have any thoughts about that, but probably people in the room do. And
I didn't get to that one.
You didn't get to that one? Okay, well, go.
Well, because one of the things I didn't get to is my recommendation for funders. One is absolutely the quality of what you're building. But the quality of once building, a lot of kind of the guidelines are, I think, a little ancient in regards of the square foot of a unit. But one of the things for me is an absolute is that we're, leasing and renting to people that are truly low income. And the idea that if I'm taking any type of government subsidy, absolutely you should be coming in and asking us that question. Yeah, no issue at all. I think where it gets a little tricky is when we're tapping into smaller subcontractors, and we're trying. I just keep thinking of our roofer where they're, they go in, they do great work. They're very competitive. We have plenty of people that bid on our jobs, so I feel like what we're paying. But it is that bureaucracy, and there's a balance there. But at the same time, one of the things that I do like, and we do utilize in Portland. Not all of our folks, but is this SDC waiver. So part of that system development charge waiver means we have to report, we have to make a commitment to long-term affordability, And we have folks who come to us and say, oh, you're building at an affordable price. You want to build for me so I can get rich? No. Thanks, but no thanks. And one of our test case for folks are, well, you know what? One of the good things I think that the City of Portland does is SDC waivers, but you got to do a 60-year commitment to affordability. And you got to be willing to have folks come in and look at your rent rolls. No issue with that at all.
Questions do folks have? You had a few minutes to have a little conversation. I'm seeing hands over here.
I would love to.
Mike Fieldman. I'm going to pick on Mike Fieldman. He's on the Housing Stability Council. That's my policy board. So let's start with Mike Fieldman. And then we'll come back over here. Hey now, those lunches are awesome.
Actually, I have 3 questions for you. One, real quick ones. Curious what your average cost per square foot for construction is. Sure. 2, are you your own general contractor? And 3, are you looking for a nonprofit to partner with in Southern Oregon?
So our as you can imagine, the cost, because in Oregon there is a little bit of a housing boom, so we are watching our costs go up, and some of our vendors, the costs are going up just because they can raise our prices. So right now we're probably just shy of $90 a square foot, which when I first started doing this, we were like $78 a square foot. So I mean that cost. One of the things we've done is we don't have our own general contractor. We've had one general contractor we've worked with, and one of the reasons why we like working with him is he's transparent. So we'll say, all right, here's on a particular project, this is your profit. All these other line items, we're drilling down on, to really make sure we can keep those costs down. Right. What's been fun for us is we have 2 other general contractors that have approached us and said, we like your mission, can we talk? One of which, I asked him, I said, well, would you build in Southern Oregon? Because I just agreed to go to a housing forum, I think it's in Curry County, and I think, actually, so one of your county commissioners reached out to me, had a great conversation, and she's like, we need technical assistance. But after talking to her, I'm like, she's really smart. I mean, I said, this stuff. It's it's a question of how you kind of start to put it together.
Okay, over here, yeah.
Thank you. Hi. Okay, so my name is Vicki D'Alessandro, and I'm with Access. And it would be great for you to come to Southern Oregon, specifically the Medford area. I'm actually wondering, when you do go to different areas, do you hire people to work for you that live there in that local community to also boost their wages, give them a job, their income?
Great question. So we're having our first experience of that right now. We have agreed to work with a housing authority in Deschutes County. Housing Works is the organization. Tom Kemper is their executive director.
We have a board member here.
And I'm really impressed in working with Tom and his staff to really kind of figure this out. And one of the things that Tom has said, I think with your model and with some state dollars, we can do this. So we're submitting for permit next week on 53 townhouses in Bend. So one of the things that we're doing with our general contractor and also with our professional folks, so we kind of have a little bit of a hybrid. So we have our architect that we've worked with, but the civil engineer, and a planner and the person that's doing the traffic study all live in the Bend area. Part of that conversation is our general contractor that we're working with. He has a couple of his subs that will travel, but also we're working with Housing Works because they have been working with subs that have been doing a great job. So we're in the process of saying, all right, but here's our price point, here's the cost framework we're working within, and let's figure that out. But again, we're just getting ready to submit, but those conversations, and frankly, the team of folks we're working with at Housing Works have been brilliant. that I feel real good about. That idea of a marriage, of really tapping in, to folks that are local, and how do you, utilize that, and creating that framework so it can work for everybody.
My name is Raquel Miller, and I'm with the CAP here in Oregon. And I just had a question. The discussion at our table was we were really aware of all the profits that were coming from affordable housing, and now we're all pissed off at this table too. So just say it.
Yes.
You mentioned that you have people who are low income that are living in these units.
Absolutely.
What about people with other barriers? Criminal backgrounds, credit?
So right now, we don't own our own housing. So we work with nonprofits that own the housing, and those nonprofits are the ones that, set that criteria. One of the organizations we're building for is Portland Rehabilitation Center. Their mission is to work with people with disabilities. So they, and I know they have gone kind of back and forth on, the criteria of who they're housing. But that's part of why, for our bias is, we're not interested in building for ourselves and creating our own portfolio of units. We want to build for the local community. We want to build for nonprofits that have the relationships with the people, and let's get you a building. I mean, let's build something that is durable, that works for your community. And then, but that whole property management side and that relationship is critical. And again, I mean, I worked 16 years with folks that were chronically homeless on the streets. So, I have a real bias, and, and I've said this to some of our mental health providers locally, I would love to build them a building that's just basically debt-free. I mean, let's figure it out where we can get, the right type of subsidies, because there is, the demand and the need for that community is huge. So.
Mary, do we have time for one more? Right here, good, okay.
Sorry.
Two more, all right. This one first and then over here, yes.
Are there any discussions ongoing about maybe building units based on the Dignity Village model using tiny houses?
Love the idea. I just had somebody from Battleground talk to me about that idea. We actually have spent a lot of time kind of playing with the tiny house, interviewing, looking at different modular, products, and how do you kind of bring down that cost. Have had even some conversations with the city and BDS around, all right, zoning. What type of zoning do we got to really look at? So we have not done that. I think it's a brilliant idea. And this was the conversation with a woman from Battleground. For me, there's also this other bigger conversation that I know all of you have discussed, and that's this notion of assets versus services. I would love to build an apartment complex where the tenants own the units. Build a tiny house where the individual owns the tiny house, not a nonprofit. So, I think that's also where we need to go, because in that whole asset, I much rather give somebody, I would rather give somebody some money to buy their own groceries than a food box. And so I know there's some really innovative conversations about looking at that, and that includes housing.
And let me just sort of underscore that. At the state, we're going to be offering this $40 million that the legislature appropriated in the last session. That'll be on the street, I suspect, in June or July of this year. But we're going to invite folks to give us those really innovative proposals. If you've been working on a tiny house or a modular sort of or manufactured housing product type, or show me a shipping container concept if you can make it. Like, we want to sort of use this unique opportunity, the unique money we got, to encourage that kind of innovation. So we'll see how it goes, but you can bring us something. And then last word over here, Janet.
Hi, I'm Karen Dunn. I work for the Department of Commerce in Washington. One of our challenges we face is any government funding that flows through nonprofits automatically enacts the prevailing wage requirement. So our low-income weatherization, for instance, prevailing wage is required. So I could foresee that in the issues where our CAPs might want to utilize something such as this, it would be really a hard challenge. I love what you're doing, and I think it's fabulous. I'm just not sure how we could work around that, other than they would get private funding. But I don't know in Oregon if that's a requirement. I know you mentioned prevailing wage.
It
My
depends
first question.
on.
It depends on the color of
Yes,
money, but
yeah.
in
Yeah.
general, the expectation is yes.
Yeah, it doesn't matter in ours. If we touch it, it automatically kicks it in. And
So here's a couple things where we're tapping into some non-government money that is pretty exciting for us. One is we have a framework, so we're having mission-oriented investors that are coming to us and saying, we want to do something, and we're fine with a 2 to 3% return, and we're fine with a long-term commitment of affordability. So we're having, that conversation has been having, or we're having so many people come to us, we're actually working with a banker to talk about maybe creating our own fund. The other one, which I'm very excited about, is with the churches. We've spent the last year working with the United Methodist Church, their conference, which includes Oregon, Washington, and Idaho, and the bishop has reconfigured what is, in essence, their constitution of what they can do with their land and what they can do with their money, so that they can repurpose land to build affordable housing. So we have a conversation with their lawyer next week because his cabinet and their board of trustees approved it. So what that means, not only are we going to be able to tap into church land, but the larger churches actually have some pretty significant resources. So to one point where our conversation with the United Methodists, they said, we might just self-fund this. Wow. And the conference here, again, is the Northwest, and they are closing churches, by the dozens, regionally. So they're not. It's just not the Methodists; it's the Lutherans, the Presbyterians. So that's an issue. But I think there's in communities. I think there could be some other opportunities.
just a challenge, but not impossible.
Yeah, you bet.
Thanks.
Thank you.
All right, very provocative. You've got, I know you're jealous because there's not enough T-shirts to go around, but please help me thank Rob Justus for his work and conversation.